Your Creative Push, episode 338.
Don't just not be hard on yourself. Celebrate that you're human and that you have to take the downtime.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Tiffany Miller Russell. Tiffany is a wildlife artist and natural history illustrator, and she comes on the show today to talk about her initial exposure to paleo art and how she discovered people who were combining art and natural science and how that took her on her own creative journey. She shares how she does research in which she picks apart dead animals in a zoology prep lab, and then the actual process of creating her pieces, where some of them take up to 300 hours to complete, and how she is able to stay in the chair that long to create those pieces, some of her tips. And one of those big tips, and one of the themes of this episode, and how she deals with time management difficulties, is the way she turns it into a game. And we dive deep into that game and into her reward system and her point system, and also the psychological differences between rewards and costs in your creative tracking. And then Tiffany dives into some of the other resistances that she deals with on a daily basis, both physical in putting in all those hours into creating each piece, but also mental, like battling perfectionism and comparison to others. One of the themes of this episode was fun, and I had such a fun time talking with Tiffany as we dove deep into her creative process that I know is going to inspire you and also bring a smile to your face. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Tiffany Miller Russell. Tiffany, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Hi, young man. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. One of my listeners initially put me on to you and said that you would, or that they really wanted to kind of hear more about your journey and how you make what you make, which blew me away. Just the intricacies involved with the paper sculptures that you make, but you also are a very talented illustrator and artist. So really excited to kind of dive into what you do and how you do it.
Okay, well, great. I don't know who that is, but thank you so much, listener. That's fantastic to have you spread the word, and I'm very flattered.
Very cool. I always like at the start of the show to give my guests the opportunity to kind of share how you got to the point you are today in your creative life.
Okay. So, I mean, we're going back to childhood, right? In elementary school, I did a little bit of drawing, and I realized I was good at it, but it wasn't really my passion at the time. Writing was, and I kind of rediscovered drawing at the end of middle school and took it into high school. I also am a big science nerd.
Me too.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
paleontology is really was really my driving force with the science, biology and wildlife. And for most of my high school career, I didn't know if I wanted to do science or art. And it was in high school that Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design from Denver, and I grew up in Colorado Springs. They came down to our school and they talked about going to art school. And they had a summer program for high school seniors. So they had a week-long program where you got to go up, stay in some borrowed dorms from a university that actually had dorms, and spend a week doing different classes from different professors at the college. And that's where I first ran into Gary Staab, who is a scientific, I'm not going to call him an illustrator because he sculpts, but he's a scientific artist and a paleo artist, and he's done work with zoo books. He's done work with National Geographic. He's done the big, huge life-size super croc model that he talked about, as well as he does a lot of dinosaurs. He's done some models outside the Science Museum, the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And so that's where I first just heard of scientific illustration and paleo art and realized I could combine the two passions. So I'm like, oh, that's great. And I'm going to go to RimCAD because it's a cool school. It's a cool art school. It's close. And there's the scientific illustrator there. He was in the sculpture department. I never actually ended up taking any classes from him during my time there, but I did get to know him afterwards as a professional peer. So anyways, I went to Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design straight out of high school. And I went for a year and a half and I ran out of money because I was taking out loans kind of on a year-to-year basis. And I ran out of kind of energy for it. I was probably a little too young to work that intensely or that seriously, which I wanted to, in my heart I am, but still, I was a kid. So I never actually finished my degree. But I did learn a lot about illustration. I learned a lot about professionalism. And I did really enjoy my time there, even though I got into debt for a lot of money, which isn't even the full amount that most people get into debt for going to an art school. But
yeah, welcome to the club.
Right. So it's a good environment to be surrounded by people that are serious about having art in their lives. And even more so than coming out with a degree at the end of it, because really there are very few art paths that actually require a degree short of going back into teaching back at a university. Nobody really ever looks at the degree. That's one thing that I learned. But what you really get out of it is the environment and the creativity that surrounds you from your peer fellow students.
Right. That's such a huge thing in life when the creative journey is sometimes a very lonely journey, and especially when, kind of like you were saying before, when you're wavering between science and art. It's like, oh man, which way do I go? And it's like, I'm the only person in the world that has to make this decision. Was it helpful then to go to college and to meet individuals who were doing stuff that combined the two things?
They weren't doing that there. I felt like I was the only one interested in scientific illustration at my college. And I didn't feel like I was the only one that had to make that choice between science and illustration. I just didn't know that option of combining the two paths was a possibility. So I got really excited when I found out. Now, where I met my community, and community is really everything, no matter what you're into. And it's wonderful with the world that we have today. You can really find a lot of people involved in really super small niches. But the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators is a professional organization that I don't remember how I first discovered them, but actually, let me go back. Because they had a conference in Denver, which I didn't go to because I was young and not doing conferences. But I heard about them that way. And then I joined their listserv. And so I got a lot of more professional advice and just inspiration from other people and finding out about that career path, which I didn't go down, but I just kind of dabbled in it until I discovered paper sculpture, which I wanted to have combine into scientific illustration when I first discovered it. But I kind of pulled away from the illustration for a number of reasons. One being the paper sculpture. The book that I found on paper sculpture was put out by an illustration group and has, I think, 30 different artists in it working in different styles, but they're all pretty much illustrators. But for me, I put so much foreplanning into it, and I'm a perfectionist, that the amount of time spent doing a single paper sculpture and my knowledge of my foreknowledge rather than experience of the illustration world is that you're working with art directors that have their own tight deadlines. So I couldn't imagine doing a paper sculpture on a tight deadline. And it's also a very physical product at the end of it. So that's where I draw the line with fine art. And that could be another topic for another discussion. But with fine art, you're selling something physical, and with illustration, you're selling something that the end product is something that's reproduced somewhere. So paper sculpture being so physical, you end up with something that takes a lot more space than something done on a sheet of paper. And what do you do with that? Well, you sell that physical object. So that's kind of fine art right there. Other reasons I kind of pulled away from it were about that time, the Orphan Works Act was kind of a big threat that the illustration community was really concerned about. And
what is that?
It was something that was trying to be pushed through Congress, and it died, and then it re-emerged a few years later, and I don't know what the actual outcome is that came from it, but it's about copyright. And if you, as a user, as somebody that wants to use an image, would find an image on the web without any attribution to it, and you don't know where it came from, and you do your, here's the air quotes, due diligence, undefined, on trying to find the creator of that, but you're unable to find the creator, then you can use it without any copyright repercussions, which is kind of a big problem for illustrators, of course, that their end product is that reproduction and that reproduction right.
Sure, and all it takes is one person to not attribute you, and then
right.
If somebody finds that unattributed image, like they can use it, I guess, by law, then. Wow.
Yeah, and it's not your
realize
fault.
that.
And somebody
Right.
could scan something out of a book even that has all that information attached to it, and then it becomes unattached through no fault of the artist or the publisher, just the person that initially shares it.
Wow.
So that was a big threat and a big worry to somebody that's never really stepped into the illustration career. So that was one reason I kind of reevaluated. I didn't go through a formal reevaluation. It just kind of made it a little less attractive to me. But one of my big reasons was actually being interested in paleontology and paleo art. I kind of just got pulled into a different direction because paleo art is, it's a form of wildlife art. You're reconstructing an environment in the most realistic way that you can based on the knowledge that you have. And you're reconstructing an animal in the most realistic way based on the knowledge that you have. And a lot of that knowledge comes from our present day animals and our present day ecosystems, and just being outside and taking a look at how the animals move and how the plants grow, and whether it's the growth pattern of a tree or the growth pattern of a forest. You really should get that right. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't. They just look at a flat fossil and kind of produce this diagrammatic illustration that doesn't look very lifelike. But the people that really study that kind of stuff really capture something. And I want to be the best that I can. And that was something that I just started studying modern extant animals and fell in love with what's alive today. And of course, it's easier to study too. They're right at hand. So
Right.
It was a means to an end that became an end in itself.
Right. And you also, I read, work or volunteer in a zoology prep lab and also a paleo lab. Is that right?
I used to.
Was that just for fun because you enjoyed that, or was that to get more of an inside look into the things that you'd be creating, almost like research?
Oh, yes. Yes to all. Absolutely.
Yes to all.
Absolutely fun. It's fun picking dead animals apart. It takes a certain kind of person, I think, for that, but it's so fun for the right kind of person, and that is me. It's fun to be around the people that are also into that. definitely a lot of study and learning motivation. And whether that's learning for fun, like learning how many cusps are on the molar of a primitive horse. It's not going into my art now, but I still find it fun to learn about now. Now, when I was volunteering, I was very interested in doing scientific illustration, in whatever form that took, more publication-oriented illustrations, which would be like pen and ink on conkeal or stipple board for reproduction in a scientific paper, or something that might be in a magazine article or a field guide. So I was really interested in that for professional research, also research for fun, and then also professional connections that you get from scientists that are working at the museum. And once again, that all comes back to community. So there were a lot of reasons. It was just fun all around.
Right. And I think that's the key takeaway there, because I'm always saying on this podcast, like, it doesn't matter what the end product of whatever you're creating is. It's like enjoying that time creating it. It's like that's where the magic is, and that's where the focus should be, on enjoying the process, but also like finding ways to enjoy the other things that you're interested in, like to bring in other subject matters, like the things that interest you. For me, it's space. I can't get enough of outer space documentaries, or just reading up about the latest things that are happening in like space exploration, or just what we're discovering. And that finds its way into my writing and stuff like that at some point. But it's like developing that baseline of just enjoying the things that you're interested in, and not being afraid to like take opportunities like working in a research lab or whatever. It's like diving into that and enjoying that, because then, like you said as well, you can get connections with other people that can lead you to other opportunities. And it's just trying to like, just, I don't know, enjoy life as much as possible, and by surrounding yourself with the things that you're most interested in, and not being ashamed of that,
Yeah, exactly. You're going to make me ashamed that I'm not, haven't done that for so long now.
No, I'm not trying to guilt you.
I've been a studio hermit for far too long.
Like I said, the first thing, you're getting to the creative passion, which is equally important. But I kind of wanted to take it back a little bit to how you first started getting into the paper sculptures. Like, how did you learn about it? Did you see somebody else doing something like it? Or like, what were those initial kind of first days like?
So I was fairly fresh out of my 1.5 year underdegree stint at art college. And I was into scientific illustration. I knew I wanted to do that, but there are, even within that niche career path, there are a lot of further niches that you can go down. And one could be the subject matter, like you mentioned, space. Like for me, it was going to be dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures.
Yes.
But also, like I said, I'm very interested in. And it's all biology for me, and mostly animals, but also plants and botanical things. So there are those specialties in your subject matter, but also in not necessarily your technique, like it would be in fine art, but in your clientele. So you could specialize in doing field guides or research papers or children's books. And those were all possibilities that were open to me, and I wasn't sure where I was going to go with that yet. But then I ran across a paper sculpture. It was very serendipitous. It was very much by chance, and in one of the places I was least looking for it, of course, but it hit the right light bulb, and I found it as the image that was reproduced on a jigsaw puzzle that I found at the Arc when I was doing some community service time there. So I'm interested in jigsaw puzzles, and they're over by the books, and I'm a big bibliophile, so I always browse those sections. But I found this jigsaw puzzle with this art form on it that even in the reproduction was just jaw-dropping, just really rich and you could just step right into it. The colors were so succulent. And the way that they blended into each other and kind of danced around each other with the shadows and the shapes. And the artist that did it was Leo Monahan, and he's quite a colorist. But I really, it hit the right light bulb, and I said, what is this? And I looked into the medium of paper sculpture. And I started at one of the bookstores, and there was a book that was out on it, which I mentioned earlier. Paper Sculpture, a step-by-step guide, I think is the title. Mm-hmm. But that was really kind of my start. And also that book, it's a rare art form. We were kind of few and far between, the paper sculptors at the time. It's a lot more popular now than it was when I started 15 years ago. And it just seemed like the right timing that book was published, and it wasn't out for, it's not still printed today. I don't know what its publishing run was, but, I was lucky to be there when it was published and pull it out when it was being carried at the bookstore, and it was just right for me.
And then how much of a learning curve is there to something like making paper sculptures? Like, did it prove to be easy at first? Like your first paper sculpture that you made, were you like, wow, this is great? Or did it take a little bit of trial and error to find your mojo, so to speak?
No, it was wow. It's great right from the start. There's things that you learn with the technique that, what kind of glue to use, how to build a frame to house the thing afterwards. That was certainly something I developed on my own, how to transfer your drawing. But those are not necessarily seen in the end product, because the end product is really based on, your art skill of going into it, having a good drawing, having a good composition, having a good color. And that was something that you get right off the bat, even if it's a medium that, a lot of artists actually work with paper to create thumbnails and to just play around. So, that tells you how easy it is. And whether you get the three-dimensionality of sculpting the thing that you're trying to sculpt, whether you achieve that or not, that's almost kind of secondary. And that's certainly something that I've developed over the years as I do more experience. Maybe I cut something no better, or maybe I get it more three-dimensional, but that's really kind of secondary.
And about how long does each one take?
Oh, far too long.
Far too long.
Far too long. My biggest piece is 40 inches wide by, I think, like 40 by 30. And it is a very complex piece of a raven dancing in barbed wire. And all the feathers are cut on his breast and on his neck and his lovely raven beard. They're all color plotted out because they all shine with a little bit of iridescence from the feathers next to them. And the barbed wire is all cut in individual pieces. And it's a very complex piece, and that one took about 300 hours.
Whoa. Well worth it though, because that piece is beautiful. It's really great.
Thank you. So my smallest one-of-a-kind pieces are the Sandhill Cranes, which are doing very well for me. Those are about 20 to 25 hours each for one of those.
Wow. Okay, so when you know the amount of work and the amount of time that it takes to make one of these, like you said, one-of-a-kind pieces of art, how do you decide what you're going to make? Like, do you have like a queue of ideas that like you're just kind of waiting to create, like that you want to make? Or is it kind of just on the spot? You just decide, okay, I'm going to make this animal or this thing that you find in nature?
Yes, I certainly have a queue, but it's not a organized, polite line, that's for sure. A lot of times it's driven by something that's upcoming. I have a show that's coming up and I'm out of Sandhill Cranes and I know those will sell. So I will make some more Sandhill Cranes. Plus they're pretty fast for me to make. So they're an easy one. But I like the challenge of having a challenge and, having a spark of inspiration that doesn't come from me. So you're not staring at the blank page per se, although I have like a certainly large queue of ideas. But it is hard to pick the next one when I have so many of them. Like it gets a little overwhelming, but it's nice to have a little inspiration. So if there's a show that's coming up, like I'll be doing a Western show at the end of the year in September. And so I may focus on more local wildlife, wolves and foxes and bison and magpies and things. So that could be kind of the start for something like that. I have a paleo show at the end of March that I would like to make some more paleo pieces for because it's been a while. There was a show that I was invited to be a part of about amphibians and art, and that sparked a couple pieces that I created specifically for that show.
Does it ever get frustrating then with, like knowing that you have a bunch of ideas and knowing the upcoming shows that you want to, get more of a specific thing out there? Do you ever get frustrated with like time, or do any of those resistances pop up, like where you're just like, I don't have enough time to do this and still kind of live life,
Oh God, yes, all the time.
How do you deal with that?
We're getting to the meat of the interview, aren't we?
Oh yeah.
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm kind of a podcast junkie because I do spend a lot of time in my studio listening to podcasts and letting my brain kind of work around them as I'm cutting. Keeps me in my chair, and it lets my brain work and also kind of split that concentration into kind of a meditative sort of way. So, but I love podcasts. So I heard an interview with Steve Camp. I might not even be pronouncing that right, but he wrote a book called Level Up Your Life, and he talked about his system. It was basically taking a game development mentality and applying it to your life. And I had been kind of thinking about that. I have games on my iPad, and who doesn't, right? But they take up your time, and some of them are more addicting than others. So I've been thinking about, what is it that keeps you playing when you have a game and you're playing it when you really should be doing something else. So I have been thinking about that kind of game development mentality. And then I heard the interview and some possible ways to apply it. So I came up with my own system, kind of loosely based on the interview that I heard from him. And so that's what I've been working on as kind of a time management.
And what are some of the specifics of that?
Well, so I kind of I wanted to try to turn time management, and time management is a problem for me. I am a procrastinator by nature, and I am much better with having a task to do that somebody else gives me than being self-motivated and a self-starter. So that's why having a system in place for people like that is kind of giving yourself a little bit of external motivation if you're not a good self-motivator. So my system that I came up with is kind of based around, well, if you have a game that's, now this is my system, that's not necessarily the system that Steve came up with in his book. I just listened to his podcast. I've not gone to his website or looked at his book, although I did buy it for somebody else. Awesome to support him because that podcast, that interview with him did really help me out. But my system that I came up with is kind of based around a game style system that might have in-game money. And so I created a list of tasks that I do throughout my day that I assign myself points for.
Cool.
It's just a in-game monetary system, really. So
And then what kind of tasks do you get points for? Like
Right.
which tasks give you more points, and then what do the points get you? You know, is it just to see like the number keep growing and have that be kind of like a psychological like reward system, or like do you get to cash in on like treats for yourself
Yes,
once you get a
exactly.
certain amount of points?
Yes, exactly. So something like, working on paper sculpture for an hour would be 3 points, or posting on social media would be maybe 2 points. But if I get stuck surfing the internet, that would be minus a point. So then there's the plus and minus system. So I made a list of tasks throughout my day, things that I do that move myself forward with my art and my career, and things that kind of get me stuck. And those things that would get me stuck would be, a cost. And then maybe at the end of the day, if I've done well enough, then I can earn myself time to surf or read. That's basically how it works at the most basic level. And then there'd be things like extra bonuses for extra events that don't happen so often, and might be like having a sale would be plus 15 points, which is great. I've made a new connection and made somebody a new art collector happy and familiar with my work. So that's a really awesome thing to have happen. Working for a really big goal, like doing an art festival, which is something you might prepare for a month. So that's quite a big reward bonus. So things like that would come in. And then I would look at things that I've done every week. So I'd have my weekly goals. Did you do this? Here's some extra bonuses. Did you not do this? Okay, well, there's a cost if I didn't quite get that. And reevaluates like daily goals, weekly goals, and monthly goals. So this system has worked for me, and it's also not worked for me. It used to work for me more, and it's kind of failing me now. So I'm in a reevaluation mode with it. And the epiphany that I came to this morning, which you touched on earlier in our interviews, is to keep it fun, because there's a misconception that there's this dichotomy of motivation. There's the carrot and the stick. You have the carrot, the goal that you want, and the donkey moves forward, and you have the switch at the end, which you smack the butt of the donkey to get the donkey to move forward. But that is a false dichotomy. Donkeys, that's when you're sitting on the back of the donkey and the donkey doesn't want to move forward. But, there's also, the donkey goes forward because the donkey wants to move and stretch his legs and maybe just walk and enjoy life and frolic in the meadow. So there's that motivation, which is really the true motivation. And the thing about the game mentality of this system is that the keyword is game, and so it should be fun. For me, that is learning and an experiment. And when I first started doing this, it was a great experiment to see if it would work. And so it was fun just to actually do the process. So it was a great experiment. And because I've been doing it for 2 years now, and I've lost focus, I've lost sight that this system is not about the stick and the carrot. It's about the fun process of almost discovering yourself. Is this something that I can work with? Does this fit me? And if it doesn't, and I had kind of worked into the DNA of the system, per se, a way to reevaluate this. Like every Monday I would sit down, I'd evaluate my last week and think about what I need to do for the upcoming week, and then change things and fiddle with things a little bit. Like, okay, next week I have a big festival. So, if I have a goal of 6 hours a day to create art, that's not going to work with me for the upcoming week. So what other goals are more important to me for this week? And, what kind of ways can I change that to motivate myself to do that? So what I found with using this system is that it's really helped me a lot with balancing my time, which is, it's a huge goal. It's a huge problem for a lot of people. I mean, I'd say artists, and then expand that to creators, but I'm just going to say people, we have a lot of problems in our modern day of balancing life. And so this kind of kept me, if I have these particular goals and I'm trying to look at them every day and make sure that, I'm balanced. So that's helped me a lot with that.
Right. It's one of the most difficult things that I think any human being can do, especially with so many like kind of distractions or so many other things that you could be doing instead of the thing that you need to get done first. And I think that that's kind of the key, is finding ways that work for you as an individual to get to the important things first before, like while you still have like the focus, while you still have the energy, and putting your best brain power towards the things that are most important and are going to move you forward the most. Of course, distractions are going to come in, and of course, like we have other things that we need to get to in our daily life, but finding ways to put as much focus on the important things as possible. For me, like it's kind of like a game. Like I will chunk down. I'm like, okay, I need to edit the podcast for the next 2 hours. I know the episode is going to take 2 hours, so like literally writing down on a piece of paper, like every 15 minutes, like what part of the what minute mark I want to be up to in order to get to that point. And then when it's like chunked down to like 10 or 15 minutes, I can just focus deeply, having that one goal that I need to get to, like that one micro goal, that one waypoint that I need to get to, makes it much easier to get through the whole process as a whole, to get through the whole 2 hours without seeing it as like this big 2 hour process. No, it's just like a bunch of 15-minute chunks. That definitely helps me to get like into that deep work. And it's kind of a rewarding system too. Like, every like 3 15-minute chunks, I can have a snack or something, just like really stupid rewards that I can give myself for, I can maybe like watch a YouTube video for 5 minutes. But that's a dangerous one too. But
does it ever work? Can you only ever watch just one?
Right. That's what I was just going to say. That's a pretty dangerous reward to give myself, because pretty much everything YouTube recommends on the right for videos, I want to watch them all. And I find myself opening tab after tab of YouTube videos that I want to queue up,
Yeah. See, that kind of system, like I am horrible with that. Like having that hour by hour schedule on my calendar. And I've tried, and I've never even gotten past, the starting gate with that. Just to have such a rigid set in your day, which, maybe if I actually did, I would find it to be very useful. But I think with my personality, that hasn't worked. But this one, it's a little bit more freeform, although, and it kind of surprises me because I've been thinking, gosh, that's so rigid, because I'm tracking like everything that I do during the day, saying this is good, this is bad. But yeah, I mean, to go back to it, it's whatever really works for you and keeps you excited. And it's not about the reward or the punishment. It's about, are you having fun doing it? And creating a system it's really an experiment, which is where the fun is. And that's where, I realized, I've lost the fun out of the process, which is why the process isn't working for me so well anymore. I've lost motivation to keep track of my time. And, as I reevaluate my goals every week, that does spark a little bit of experimentation back into it, and a little bit of seeing, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Is it going to get me where I need to go with my goals?
No, you're exactly right though. And it's, that's why it's important to have conversations like this and see like unique ideas that work for somebody else that like you can try and just see if it works for you. Even if like you don't think you necessarily have that personality type, like just give it a shot and see what it's like to give yourself points. You made a good point, like, oh, is this, this is kind of crazy. I'm like tracking everything that I do. But sometimes that's like really important for people to do, like to start tracking that so that they can actually see, oh my gosh, I'm spending way too much time doing X, like whatever it is that's keeping me away from my work. I think in our brains, we lie to ourselves sometimes, like, and say, oh no, I was only on, scrolling Instagram for like 7 minutes or something like that, when it was really like 45 minutes. So it's like kind of like a good way to like show yourself the truth, so to speak, Oh
yeah. So it's a delicate balance, because if you get too down on yourself, like I said, I have costs built into the system. If I spend half an hour surfing or something is not productive for me, then there's a cost to that. But it's really easy, really, really easy to get yourself distracted like that. So then I started doubling the costs for things if it was during my actual work day. But if you get too down on yourself, you see that negative number in your daily tracking, and then it's like it's all downhill from there. And you have to keep giving yourself rewards. So going back to like why there are games that are addictive and that make you keep moving on. One of the style of games that I really like to play is puzzle games. So you get like a puzzle to solve that's really, really hard that you have to keep starting over and over again. And then when you finally finish it and get that level, then you just get really great rush, but it was really, really hard work to do. So the most successful games are the ones that give you the really hard level, and then the ones that give you and then you get a really easy level after that. Like, whew. And then, okay, what's the next level going to be like? I'm going to keep going. And then, before you know it, it's 3 a.m. and you're still lying in bed punching buttons on your phone.
Been there.
Yeah. So, and I don't play those anymore in my life. I've gotten a little bit better with that. Try to just avoid the addicting situations like that. But that's where the benefit is. If you know that here's something you can get addicted to, why not apply that to your work? How do you apply that process that makes it something that you keep looking forward to and keep getting that excitement and that kind of adrenaline rush? If you have a game that just throws nothing but super hard levels at you all the time, you maybe don't want to keep picking up that game anymore. You just get tired with it and bummed out. And that's kind of, I realize that's kind of maybe where I've been heading in my life lately, is I need to give myself more small wins and make the process fun again, not just the process of time management, but the process of creating art.
Right. That's such a good point too, because the system could be working very well for you. And this is like any artist's life or any person's life. Like there's peaks and valleys. Like there's times, there's weeks where you're just putting in hours and hours of work every day and it's fun and everything is coming easy. And then you can't sustain that forever. So obviously there's going to be down times when, maybe you need to adjust the point system on purpose for yourself, where you have a bonus day where it's just you get more points for doing the distractions or for doing more research, so you can
I like that idea.
Yeah, because you do need to find that overall balance, not just the balance for the day, but for the month, and to see friends and not to become too feral. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's important to keep reevaluating, not be too hard on yourself when you're not, and that's where I was going to say not be too hard on yourself, but I mean, you even hit it further. Don't just not be hard on yourself. Celebrate that you're human and that you have to take the downtime. Or even when you think you should be working, you just don't have the energy to do it. That's natural. Don't be too hard on yourself. And also don't get too stuck within the system, and keep reevaluating it and keep chasing after that joy of moving your muscles rather than the carrot. Exactly. Well, now, as you're deep in your work, working on a project, whatever it may be, whether it's a paper sculpture or something else, do you ever find yourself hitting blocks? Do you ever find yourself having resistances, self-doubt, or just getting too frustrated or anything like that? Who doesn't? Yeah. I do in between projects, but my process of working is so methodical and step by step. I visualize everything in my head pretty much right away. I want this piece to look like this, and then it's kind of a matter of following the steps until I get there. I might think the idea is dumb. Maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe it's not what I need to be working on right now. But once I start it, then I am out the gate and ready to go. Although some of the resistances that I get are physical ones, which are just the physical problems of sitting at my desk with my head down all day. So that's where that balance comes in. One of my things that I reward myself for is going for a walk. I have to keep moving. So that's where getting that balance is, so that I don't end up every day with just crazy headaches. Right. But I mean, in between projects,
all the self-doubt, all the imposter syndrome, all the, am I working on the right thing right now? Probably one of the biggest things is wondering if I'm working on the right thing, because my projects do take me a long time to do. And I always have problems underestimating how long they're going to take. Even with all the experience that I get, I'm just a little optimistic with my time. But because they take so long to do, I know that, I'm going to be working on this. I'm not going to be working on something else. So one of the biggest questions is, am I really working on the right thing right now? But you can't let that get in your way, because then you don't do anything, because then you're not sure what to start next. You just keep moving forward, and then, whatever you create is going to open up new doors. It might not be the path that you wanted to go down, but it's definitely going to open a path.
Right. So basically, once you start something, you're committed to completing it until finished, or has there been ones that you've kind of scrapped in the middle?
There's only been one, which was maybe my second or third one ever, that I left in a unfinished state. It's still in my desk drawer. I'd say it's one of the hardest parts, but that might not be true, because I just mentioned like really bad headaches and stuff I get from, bending over and cutting on a mat all day. But one of the most energetically hard parts of creating a sculpture is in the drawing process, which is like really where the creativity happens. And it's also the fun part, because that's when I get to apply my knowledge of anatomy and all the good artistic elements like composition and the fun stuff. But it takes a lot of energy. So everything else by that is just kind of, it's a different level of energy.
Right. Now, you just mentioned, using your knowledge of anatomy and biology, and I think back to, I looked at one of your Instagram images that you shared was from your sketchbook, and it's a bat with flowers, and your caption, it was a beautiful drawing, but your caption said that you did that without reference, which is like super impressive to me. But you also mentioned that that's like a skill you're trying to sharpen. So I was wondering like how much time you devote to that, and why is that important to you to draw without reference?
That's something I've been working on the past year or so. And I just feel like I've have been getting bogged down in my work with needing a reference. So my process of creating a piece in the designing stage is I come up with an idea from my head about what I want the piece to look like, what story I want it to tell, what the characters are doing in the story. And then I will draw and sketch right out of my head. I always start with small thumbnails to get the design down. But then I draw at a larger size what will turn into the finished drawing, which can be just a gesture. But I'll try to get that as accurate as possible. And then I will go find references of the animal that I want to use. A lot of wildlife artists in the fine art world, they use their own reference photos, and they will paint straight from a photo, and they'll be able to go out into the field and sketch an animal from life that they see and watch and observe. But my background in paleontology is you can't do that. So developing that skill of being able to take a variety of references from a variety of sources, and then creating something lifelike from it is a real challenge. And even taking that into my depictions of animals that are alive today, my interest in my subject matter is really diversity. My subject matter is diversity. It's an evolution rather than, I love birds. I do a lot of birds. But it's the diversity of the birds, it's the diversity of life. Oh, I get so excited about that. And so a lot of people say you need to niche into, let's just paint birds or backyard birds or horses or whatever. But my niche is evolution and how it happens and how exciting it is. that you get such crazy things. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the pieces I did for the amphibian show is cave salamanders. And they're these really long, skinny, crazy, blind cave salamanders from Europe. And that's not something, even though it's alive today, and I could spend thousands of dollars to go out to Europe, go visit the Alps and go find this cave where these salamanders live and visit some of their hatcheries. It's not so easy for me to do. So because I've chosen to do that kind of subject matter rather than just like bison and wolves, I have to have a knowledge of, how to take those references and those skills and apply that to my imagination and create something lifelike from that. And so like the bat is a good example. And I'm glad you enjoy that. And one of the things they tell you about your work is you're not supposed to apologize for it, but right. It is kind of my apology because, hey, this isn't from reference. So I'm apologizing for, how wrong it is, but I'm glad I liked it enough to post it. And I'm happy enough with the drawing. And then the next bats that you see are done with reference. At least, they're not from a direct reference, but they're from looking at a bat and seeing what a bat looks like. And then I realized, where I've gone wrong on the other bats, because, hey, I'd love for a bat scientist to see my work, but they'd run across that one and they go, oh, that's so wrong. Mm-hmm. Oh, but it's just a sketch from my head, which is not just a sketch from my head, because it really, you have to do those things. You have to develop those skills. And it makes your art so much better. Even if you're looking at a photograph, the artists that paint from photographs, you can tell the ones that have knowledge of anatomy and the ones that don't, because they can capture that life and they can capture the movement and the gesture of the animal.
Right. Well, for I think 99% of people that see it, like including me, it's like, I can't believe you did that without reference. You know what I mean? So is that like more, would you say that's like more of an exercise on like battling perfectionism on your behalf?
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectionism, it's following instinct. It's tapping into something internal that but you doubt about yourself. Like I know birds really well. I've studied a lot of birds. One of the things I know carnivores, wolves and cats, very well. That's something I've studied a lot. And then animal anatomy in general. I've done a lot of life drawing of humans, but then, you can have doubts about, whether you're making it real or not if you're not looking at that reference. So it's a real crutch. And it's something, it's a confidence developer. It's also tapping into that knowledge that you have. That is a skill in itself, which I want to develop that better. Because, oh man, that's one of the bad things about Instagram, right? You go on to Instagram and there's this guy that's, doing this video of him creating this like crazy, incredible demon, which, there's not a reference for that. And he's just doing this thing out of his head, and it's so gorgeous and so detailed. And man, it's like, I'm comparing myself to
Why
that.
aren't I drawing demons?
or dragon, something that doesn't exist. Yeah. Like, okay, maybe he does like fantasy ladies, but he could have been looking at a face. But then, he does the dragon, okay, he's just drawing that right out of his head. So that is so much skill. I am so not at that level. I really want to develop that. But I don't even see that in sight right now. But I'm working on it. I'm taking those steps to get there and to draw. That's where drawing from my head more. And then I'm subscribed to this service called Sketchbox, which delivers monthly art supplies to your door, which is, it's so fantastic. It's so fun. And it's never about the supplies in the box for me. And I don't think it should be for anybody. Although some people, do ask, what do you get in the box? Is it worth the X amount of money? Does it total up to that? Like, it's not about that. It's about what you do with it every month. And so I've been on that service for about 2 years. And that's something I surprised myself with, is I'm not good with the daily, do this every day sort of thing, but because it is something new every month, always keeps me excited. And I've done things like I didn't expect to keep it up more than 3 months. But like I said, I've been doing it for 2 years now, not fully successfully every day or every month, but I've not gotten bored with it. And my second month, I made an animation. God, I always wanted to make an animation, but I never thought I'd do it, especially, the more I go down my career path, the less I get pulled from other things. And but I suddenly made this little animation out of my daily paintings. And so I surprised myself with some of the things that I ended up doing, which isn't that the greatest treasure. I started doing that, and I made it my goal to not use any reference at all, and not even go and look to see, what does a bat even vaguely sort of look like? What does a jay vaguely sort of look like? I know what jays look like. I've studied birds and corvids a lot, but when you know that, and then you try to draw it out of your head and it doesn't come up looking right, there's something that you're not connecting to that you have. So I've started practicing that. And then, eventually you go from making that rule where you don't look at any reference to going, it's okay. It's okay to look at a reference, where you can make that connection between creating a better image, but using this tool in a way that's not a crutch.
Right. You really exemplified, I think, what a lot of people go through when they log on to Instagram, talking about comparison, oh, look at this guy who's doing it perfectly. I'll never be at that level. And I think so often we really underestimate the level that we're at, especially if we're working at something. But when you see somebody who's doing it in such a profound way and setting the bar so high, it's so icky, because now the gap is huge, you know what I mean? But try to use that as inspiration. Okay, I can keep working to get to that level, if I keep working and working at it, and not letting that huge gap kind of demoralize you and make you just sit on the sidelines,
Oh, and it's both inspiring and demoralizing at the same time. And
right.
Especially if you're a professional illustrator, a professional artist like I am, and you're like, I'm not at that level, but I should be. I should be at that level, but I'm not. So
I think you're much closer than you're saying. As I said, the reason I asked that question was because I was so impressed that you didn't use a reference. You know what I mean? So I think we're all often our own worst enemies when it comes to self-criticism or self-judgment or image.
And then I criticize myself that, it's an apology in a way, but that's okay, because now you're looking at it and taking something positive out of it, I hope.
Right. Before we get to the final push, I was wondering, do you have any resources or anything that really inspires you that you think would inspire everybody listening?
Well, like I mentioned, Sketchbox. That's been a fun service. I mentioned Level Up Your Life by Steve Camp. And I can't fully recommend that because I've not done the full reading of it, but it has helped me out, as well as listening to podcasts. One of the things that I'm a big bibliophile, so I read a lot of books. I research a lot. I read for fun. I read fiction for fun. I read nonfiction for fun. I read science books. I read art books. But one of the biggest things that's improved me as an artist has been my subscription to The Artist magazine. Let's take, for instance, color as an example. So if you buy, 10 books on color, you'll get 10 books that may be pretty similar to each other. And, you get a little gem here and there that somebody has explored something a little bit differently than other people, but for the most part, they're pretty much the same. You cover all your basic beginning bases. This is what you need to know for color theory. But when you get a subscription to a magazine, you get a bunch of different artists that are exploring a topic and discovering a new thing about it, and they'll write about that one little thing that they've just discovered. So you get some really interesting things. You're not just going through 101 every time you open up the magazine. For color, actually, James Gurney has got out 2 excellent books. He is such a great artist and a really great teacher in his books. He's not just, absorbing what everybody else has said and digesting it and spewing it back out. He's done his own research on things like, on his composition book, he puts, a little visor on people and tracks their eye movements. And so he's like developing new theories, on how things actually work rather than, like I said, just kind of redigesting and spewing out what, hundreds of years of artists have already, gone through. So he's a fantastic resource.
Excellent. We'll have all those resources listed at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/338. Tiffany, it is time for the final push, and that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and push them to pursue their own creative passions.
So, hey, you listener, you have something valuable. You are somebody valuable. You have a unique viewpoint, and you have a unique way of looking at the world, and you have a unique way of handling the world and yourself, and that is very valid. Don't be afraid of sharing that, and be proud of it, and be proud of yourself, and keep it fun.
Keep it fun. I love it. Yes, and this talk has been very fun. I can't wait to develop my own point system for myself. I think that I have the perfect personality for that, to reward myself, but treating it like a game, but not just like in each day, but like as like a monthly challenge too, to try to reach certain point levels and try to beat the high score, so to speak, month after month. So thank you for opening our eyes to that, and opening our eyes to your process and your wonderful art. I can't wait for people to discover you and check you out that haven't seen you yet.
Yeah, and your game doesn't have to look like mine.
Very true.
Yeah. What is the most fun for you to have? So yeah, just follow that.
I'll create more of an RPG, I think.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear what you come up with.
Okay, I'll definitely share it with you so you can try to. And for everybody listening, you can check out Tiffany's work at her website, wildlifeinpaper.com. On Facebook and Etsy, she is Wildlife in Paper. And on Instagram, she is Tiffany Miller Russell. And again, we'll have that all linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/338. Tiffany, thanks again.
Thank you, Youngman.
My thanks to Tiffany once again for coming on the show. This interview actually took place quite a few months ago, 5 months ago, I think. And since then, I have been toying with points. I have been developing point systems for myself, whether it is editing like this episode itself or longer term goals like starting to write the book or YouTube channel, or even getting back into full-time swing of things with the Your Creative Push podcast. But what Tiffany said at the end is so true. My point system is different than her point system, which will be different than your point system, which I am going to encourage you to try out for yourself. But the most important thing that you can do for developing your own game, your own point system, is to identify the thing that you know that you're supposed to get to, the thing that you know in your soul that you're supposed to get to. Maybe when you go to bed at night, you feel guilty because you didn't get to it as much as you wanted to, or because you didn't get to it at all. What is that thing that you know that you're supposed to get to? And give yourself a hell of a lot of points for getting to that. This is your system. This is your game. Nobody else's. It's not about what your boss tells you you're supposed to be doing, or your parents, or your kids, or your significant other, or anybody else. This is your game. So be brave and generous in giving yourself tons of points when you actually get to that. After you have identified that major important thing that you're supposed to be getting to, the whole purpose for this game, then figure out what other activities you can give yourself points for. And then as you are playing this game and racking up points, do not be afraid to reward yourself. Set up a reward system. For me, I get great satisfaction in just simply crossing something off of a checklist. That's almost reward enough for me. But maybe that's not enough reward for you. So give yourself something nice. Give yourself some short-term rewards as well as long-term rewards that you can build up to, that you can save up those points for. Maybe some of the shorter term rewards are some of the distractions actually that had held you back before you started the game, that kept you from getting to that big audacious goal, that soul quenching activity that you're now getting to. Give yourself a little bit of time with those distractions, whether it's like scrolling through social media or watching a TV show or a movie or going out or eating candy, whatever that short-term thing is. Feel free to reward yourself if you are indeed racking up those points. And then longer-term goals, of course, are always nice to have. Vacations or days off, whatever distant, grand reward that would motivate you to continue to play this game and to continue to have fun playing this game. Don't be afraid to reward yourself with that. And that brings me to the final point that Tiffany talked about. This is all about fun, having fun. It should be fun to rack up these points, to play this game every single day, to get to whatever your creative passion is, and to make yourself a more fulfilled person because you are actually fulfilling yourself with that big, grand desire. And then it should be fun, of course, after when you are celebrating the fact that you're living this life. But again, this is going to be an individual game. Nobody else can tell you what value you should be placing into all of the activities that you get to every single day, or maybe what negative values you should be giving yourself when you don't get to them. Nobody can tell you that except for yourself. So my encouragement to you at the end of this episode is to not be afraid to prioritize your life around the things that matter most to your soul. Be brave and don't feel guilty for giving yourself the most points for the things that you know that you're supposed to get to. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make your game of life the most fun. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get to your creative passion, to go and get your work done, and to have fun doing it. Reward yourself and give yourself a 1,000,000 point starting bonus for listening to today's episode. I love you all so much. Go and get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.